what is long QT syndrome? So long QT syndrome is an inherited cardiac arrhythmia that results from mutations in the ion channels of heart cells. And this leads to delayed repolarization of the ventricles, which then manifests on the EKG as a prolonged QT interval, right? And we really worry when we see our patients with prolonged QT intervals, because this can predispose them for some pretty lethal cardiac arrhythmias. And here's the thing, right? The incidence of long QT syndrome is about 1 in 2,000. So throughout the course of your career, you'll likely come across patients with long QT syndrome, and you want to be able to pick them up. Because gone undiagnosed, 61% of our patients will have their first cardiac event as a syncope, but 12% will come back to cardiac arrest. So the QT interval is clearly an important part of diagnosing somebody with long QT syndrome, right? So let's make sure we know what the QT interval is and what it represents. Now, I know you all look at EKGs all the time, but let's just do a quick basic review. As a reminder, atrial contraction manifests on the EKG as the P wave, ventricular contraction as a QRS complex, and ventricular relaxation as the T wave. So when we focus in on the Q and the T part of this equation, the beginning of the QRS complex tells me that my ventricles are contracting, and the end of the T wave tells me that my ventricles are relaxed. So this is your QT interval, and it essentially represents a full ventricular cycle. Okay, let's swing it back to our long QT patients then. So if we focus in on those ventricles, we'll see that they contract okay, but they're extremely delayed in their relaxation, and look what happens to my T wave, right? So this is our new QT interval, and that is what we are calling prolonged. But the question is, what causes our QT interval to be prolonged in the first place, right? And we know about these ion channel mutations, and there's no better way to get inside a cardiac myocyte than by hopping on the magic stool dance. Because when we do that, we will see the 3 ion channels that can be mutated in patients with long QT syndrome. 90% of your patients will either have a sodium or potassium channel mutation, but I've included the 1% of patients who will have a calcium mutation just for completeness. Now, I gotta do a flashback Friday to med school for you. We have to review the cardiac action potential, because it's at the basis of what goes on in long QT syndrome, so let's make sure we all know what I'm talking about. All right, so take an electrode in a cell, normal human cardiac myocyte. Sodium entering the cell causes phase 0 depolarization. Potassium leaving the cell causes phase 1 repolarization. But this is tempered by calcium entering the cell at the same time, giving us our plateau phase, right? With those calcium channels closed, potassium takes over and brings us back to baseline. So in our long QT patients, they either have a gain-of-function sodium channel mutation, a gain-of-function calcium channel mutation, or a loss-of-function potassium channel mutation. And we're going to work through each one, starting with sodium. Okay, so in a gain-of-function sodium channel mutation, you get the big guns out, right? And what you get is this increased influx of sodium into the cell. Now remember that sodium is the ion responsible for bringing me away from baseline. So this increased influx of sodium into the cell means on the tail end, I'm going to have delayed repolarization of my cell, okay? Let's work through calcium. Same thing, the big guns are out. I get an increased influx of calcium into the cell. Now, calcium is the ion responsible for that plateau phase. So again, this increased influx means at the tail end, I'm going to have delayed cellular repolarization. Okay, last one, potassium. Instead of a gain-of-function mutation, I get a loss-of-function mutation, right? And so my big guns atrophy. And potassium tries to leave the cell, but just keeps getting denied every single time, right? Potassium is the ion responsible for bringing us towards baseline. So raise your hand if you think we're going to get delayed cellular repolarization. I mean, everyone's raising their hand because we're going to get delayed cellular repolarization of my ventricular myocyte. Okay, that's cool. But I don't go around sticking electrodes in my patient's ventricles. I'm not sure you do, but hopefully not. Right? We look at the EKG. And remember, we can overlay our ventricular action potential with our EKG, such that when we get depolarization, we get our QRS complex. Repolarization, our T wave. So in our long QT patients then, normal depolarization, normal QRS, delayed cellular repolarization, and a prolonged QT interval. Okay. But our patients with long QT syndrome don't go around having cardiac events all the time, right? Something specific happens that turns a potentially lethal situation into a lethal one. So I brought a friend along to help me explain what happens. and his name is Harvey. Hey, Harvey. Okay. So Harvey is a third-year medical student on your rotation. He has undiagnosed long QT syndrome, and he's going to help me explain what happened to him in two scenarios. One in which he was walking and one in which he was running. All right, so picture this. It's the first day of his rotation with you. You tell him to show up at 7, but he's a gunner. So he's showing up, he's walking in at 4 a.m. He's like, I'm gonna surprise you all. And he has long QT syndrome, so we expect delayed repolarization. We expect a prolonged QT interval. Fast forward about a month maybe, you tell him to show up at 7, and he's sprinting it at 7:30, thinking that you're not gonna notice. But he doesn't make it in time. And if we look at the moment right before he's about to go down, we'll see that a collection of his ventricular myocytes went into what we call early after depolarizations. And these are simply mishaps in timing, right? As you're delaying your return to baseline, what happens is you get another signal to contract, and you get EADs. And EADs are the cellular manifestation of what we see on the EKG as torsades, right? And we worry about torsades, right? We go, ah! Okay, so here's the thing, right? Depending on the length of his torsades, it will tell me what might happen to him. So if his torsades last for a short amount of time, he might end up in a rhythmic syncope. If it goes on for an extended period of time, he'll go into cardiac arrest, and we need to defibrillate him to save his life. So what are you going to do for Harvey? What are you going to tell him to do? Well, we refer him to EE. And what EE is going to do is they're going to take a resting EKG from him. And the numbers we use are, for men, we call upper limit of normal 470 milliseconds, and 480 milliseconds for females. We're going to put him on exercise treadmill test to see how his EKG works when he's exercising. And then we might refer him for genetic counseling. And after all of this, we say, dude, you have long QT syndrome. So what are we going to do for him? The most important thing we're going to do is put him on beta blockers. And people tend to like Nadolol as the preferred choice for patients with long QT syndrome. We're also going to tell them to avoid QT prolonging meds, and it's suggestions to avoid QT prolonging medications as well. And you can always follow up with crediblемeds.org, which keeps a running list of all the hundreds and hundreds of QT prolonging medications you need to avoid in him. And then depending on how severe his situation is, or if he's non-compliant or intolerant of beta blockers, you might suggest an ICD or a left cardiac sympathetic denervation for him. Okay, but my learning objective was passive BIS. So when you think long QT syndrome, think about these ion channel mutations that lead to delayed repolarization of my ventricle, which manifests on the EKG as a prolonged QT interval, which then can place my patient at risk for torsades. That's all I have. Thank you.